The Galactic Academy for Species Integration had never seen anything like Elena Chen. She arrived on the space station as part of the first human exchange program, a small woman with dark hair and tired eyes who seemed completely unremarkable compared to the massive Krovath warriors or the brilliant Sileni scientists who filled the halls. The other species watched her with curiosity at first, then with confusion, and finally with something that looked very much like wonder. It started with the Torvani cubs. The Torvani were a predatory species from a high-gravity world. They stood nearly 3 meters tall as adults, covered in thick gray fur with sharp claws and teeth that could tear through starship hulls. Their cubs, however, were small and vulnerable for the first 5 cycles of their lives. They needed constant contact with their pack to feel safe enough to sleep. Without proper rest, the cubs would become sick and eventually die. This was a well-known fact across the galaxy, and it was also well known that no species outside the Torvani could provide this comfort. The Torvani ambassador had brought her 3 cubs to the station because she had no choice. Her mate had died in a mining accident, and she had no pack to leave them with. The cubs had not slept properly in 12 days. They cried constantly, their small voices echoing through the diplomatic quarters. The medical staff tried everything. They brought in soft materials from the Torvani homeworld. They adjusted the temperature and the gravity. They played recordings of Torvani pack sounds. Nothing worked. Elena was walking past the medical wing when she heard the crying. She stopped and listened. The sound reminded her of something from Earth, something ancient and painful that humans understood deep in their bones. She walked through the door without asking permission. The medical staff tried to stop her. The Torvani mother rose to her full height, her fur standing on end, her claws extended. But Elena simply walked past all of them and sat down next to the pile of crying cubs. She reached out her hand and placed it gently on the smallest one. The room went completely silent. The cub stopped crying. Its eyes, which had been wild with exhaustion, slowly closed. Within seconds, it was asleep. The other 2 cubs crawled over to Elena, pressing themselves against her. She placed her other hand on them, and they fell asleep too. The Torvani mother stared at this human woman with an expression that defied translation. "How?" the mother asked. Elena shrugged. "They needed someone to tell them it was safe. I told them." The medical staff ran tests. They analyzed Elena's body temperature, her heartbeat, the chemicals on her skin, the electromagnetic field around her body. They found nothing unusual. She was a completely ordinary human female with no special modifications or abilities. Yet the cubs would only sleep with her hand on them. The news spread through the station within hours. Within days, it reached other parts of the galaxy. Scientists from 12 different species came to study the phenomenon. They brought their own young, their own sick, their own traumatized. Some of them were skeptical. Most of them were desperate. The Kelvani were an insectoid species whose larvae needed to feel the vibration of the hive mind to develop properly. Their colony on the station had been struggling because they were too far from their homeworld. The larvae were developing slowly, and some had stopped developing entirely. Elena sat with them for an hour, humming quietly, and by the end, the larvae were thriving. The Sileni were energy beings who existed partially in another dimension. Their young sometimes got lost between dimensions and could not find their way back. 3 Sileni children had been trapped for weeks, their parents unable to reach them. Elena held out her hand toward the dimensional boundary and simply said, "Come back now, it is time to come home." The children appeared moments later, confused but unharmed. The scientific community was baffled. They ran more tests. They studied human biology, human psychology, human history. They found nothing that could explain what Elena was doing. She was not telepathic. She was not empathic in any measurable way. She had no special training or genetic modifications. She was just a human being who had worked as a kindergarten teacher on Earth for 30 years before joining the exchange program. "It is not complicated," Elena told the researchers. "Children are children. They need the same things. They need to feel safe. They need to feel loved. They need someone to tell them that everything will be okay. I do not know why your species forgot how to do this, but humans never did." The Galactic Council requested a meeting with Elena. They wanted to understand what humans had that other species did not. They sent their most brilliant minds, their most powerful telepaths, their most advanced scientists. Elena sat in front of them in her simple human clothes, looking slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. "Tell us," the council speaker said, "what is the secret of your species? How do you calm the young of other species when their own parents cannot?" Elena thought about this for a long time. She remembered her classroom on Earth, the children who came from broken homes, the children who had never been told they were loved, the children who flinched when adults raised their hands. She remembered learning to reach them, one by one, with patience and warmth and the simple act of being present. "Humans are not special," she said finally. "We are actually quite weak compared to most of you. We cannot fly or breathe in space or read minds. We die easily, and our lives are short. But because we are weak, we learned something important. We learned that the only way to survive is to take care of each other. Not just our own young, but all young. Not just our own species, but any creature that needs help." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "On Earth, we have a concept called empathy. It means feeling what another being feels. But that is not quite right. Real empathy is not about feeling. It is about choosing. It is about looking at a creature that is completely different from you and choosing to care anyway, choosing to protect anyway, choosing to love anyway." The council members exchanged glances. Some of them were skeptical, others were intrigued. A few were moved in ways they did not fully understand. "But why does it work?" the speaker pressed. "Why do the young of other species respond to you?" Elena smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was something warm in it. "Because children know," she said. "They always know. You cannot fool a child about whether you truly care about them. They feel it in your touch, in your voice, in the way you look at them. When I put my hand on those Torvani cubs, I was not pretending. I genuinely wanted them to feel safe. I genuinely cared about their suffering, and they knew that. They felt it." The academy began to change after that. Instructors noticed that their students performed better when Elena was in the room. Conflicts between species became less frequent. The entire atmosphere of the station became calmer and more cooperative. Scientists studied this phenomenon too, but they could find no logical explanation. Elena was doing nothing special. She was simply being present, being kind, being available to anyone who needed her. The change in policy came gradually. First, one instructor ended class 5 minutes early so that Elena could stay with a group of anxious Kelvani students. Then another instructor followed suit. Within weeks, it became unofficial station policy to let Elena do whatever she needed to do to help the young beings on the station. Classes were rescheduled around her presence. Important meetings were moved to accommodate her schedule. The most powerful beings in the galaxy found themselves adjusting their plans so that a single human woman could sit with frightened children. Some of the older species found this embarrassing. They were ancient civilizations with technology that could reshape stars. They should not need a primitive human to teach them how to comfort their own young. But the results spoke for themselves. The station had never been healthier. The young had never been happier. Conflicts had dropped to nearly zero. Commander Varesh of the Crovath military approached Elena one evening in the observation deck. He was enormous, covered in scales and scars from 100 battles. He had killed more enemies than most species had members. He was also deeply troubled. "I need to understand," he said. his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "My people are warriors. We teach our young to be strong, to be fearless, to show no weakness. And yet our young are struggling. They are angry and violent and unhappy. We have given them everything they need to survive. Why are they not thriving?" Elena looked up at this massive warrior who could crush her with one hand. She saw something in his eyes that she had seen many times before, in parents on Earth who worked too hard and loved too little, in adults who had forgotten what it meant to be small and scared. "What did you need when you were young?" she asked. Varesh was silent for a long moment. "I needed my father to tell me he was proud of me," he said finally. "But he never did. He said it would make me soft." "And how did that feel?" Another long silence. "It felt like I was never good enough. No matter how many enemies I killed, no matter how many victories I won, there was always this emptiness." Elena nodded. "Your young feel the same way. They do not need more training or more discipline or more strength. They need to know that they are loved exactly as they are. They need someone to hold them when they are scared and tell them that it is okay to be scared. They need someone to be proud of them, not for what they do, but for who they are." Varesh stared at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he knelt down until his face was level with hers. "Will you teach me?" he asked. "Will you teach me how to do what you do?" Elena smiled and placed her hand on his scarred face. "It is not difficult," she said. "You just have to choose. You have to choose to be soft. You have to choose to be vulnerable. You have to choose to love without conditions." That night, Varesh went to see his son for the first time in months. He did not give orders or criticisms. He simply sat with the boy and listened. He told his son that he was proud of him. He held him when the boy cried. It was the hardest thing Varesh had ever done. It was also the most important. The change spread through the Terra'sWrath community on the station. Warriors who had never shown emotion began to express love for their young. Discipline gave way to understanding. Strength was redefined to include gentleness. The young Terra'sWrath began to heal. Other species followed. The cold logic of the Seleni was tempered with warmth. The aggressive dominance of the Torvani was balanced with nurturing. The rigid hierarchy of the Kelvani was softened with individual care. Elena did not cause these changes directly. She simply showed that they were possible. She proved that strength and gentleness were not opposites, but partners. Years later, historians would point to Elena Chen as the turning point in galactic civilization. Before her, the different species of the galaxy had coexisted in an uneasy peace. After her, they began to truly understand each other. They learned that beneath all their differences, they shared something fundamental. They all wanted their young to thrive. They all wanted to be loved. They all wanted to feel safe. Elena herself never sought recognition or fame. She continued to do what she had always done. She sat with frightened children. She held the hands of the sick and the dying. She listened to the angry and the lonely. She taught, not through lectures or demonstrations, but through the simple act of being present with an open heart. The Academy built a statue of her eventually, a small human woman with her hand extended, surrounded by the young of a dozen different species. The inscription read simply, "She taught the galaxy to love." But Elena did not care about statues. She cared about the Torvani cub who finally slept through the night. She cared about the Terra'sWrath boy who smiled for the first time in years. She cared about the Seleni child who came back from the darkness because someone told them it was time to come home. That was the human gift to the galaxy. Not technology or weapons or conquest, just love. Just the simple, powerful choice to care about beings who were different from them. Just the ancient human understanding that all children, regardless of species, needed the same thing. They needed someone to put a hand on them and say, "You are safe, you are loved, everything will be okay." And because humans had never forgotten how to do this, the galaxy finally learned.